Hello everyone. So in this video, I'm going to explain very basic terms. Terms mean words and concepts in second language acquisition. So I think you don't really know much about second language acquisition, and so to understand the academic field of second language acquisition, I think first you need to know the words and concepts that are very often used in this field. So let's begin. So to begin with, what is a second language? So this is the most important question maybe. So what is a second language? So we have to define a second language. So what is it when we say a second language? So according to Wikipedia, a second language is any language learned after the first language. So here the first language is your mother tongue. So for example, my mother tongue is Japanese, and I think those people who are watching this video are also Japanese. So your mother tongue is also Japanese, I think. So that's our mother tongue or our first language. And a second language is any language learned after our mother tongue. So in this sense, so if Japanese is our first language or the mother tongue, then let's say we learn English, and then it means that English is a second language to us. Okay, and I think this is the case for many of you. But in Japan, we have this as well, 第二外国語. So in my case, 第二外国語 was French. So when I was a university student, I learned French, and that was my 第二外国語. But that's not exactly a second language. Well, it is actually a second language, but to be precise, 第二外国語 is actually a third language, because so in my case this is my first language, and this is my second language, and this is my third language, although we say it's 第二外国語. But actually, according to this definition, we can call this a second language, because a second language is any language learned after the first language. So we can have multiple second languages. So in this sense, English is a second language to me, and also French is a second language to me. So it's kind of confusing, but a second language can be a very broad term. And SLA, we often use this term, SLA. SLA stands for second language acquisition, and we also say L2 acquisition. L2 means second language. Here L stands for language, so language 2 or L2, and L2 acquisition stands for second language acquisition. So it's the acquisition of a second language. So we very often use these terms, so please remember these. And sometimes we say ESL. ESL stands for English as a second language. English as a second language. And a very similar term is EFL. It stands for English as a foreign language. And here we have some related terms. TEFL or TEFL, and this is teaching English as a foreign language, or teaching of English as a foreign language. And we also have TESOL, TESOL, and this is teaching English to speakers of other languages. So we very often hear these terms. So please remember these as well. And we've been talking about a second language, and here we have a foreign language. So we've been talking about these two types of languages and how are they different, or are they the same thing? Actually, this question is a little bit tricky because there are two definitions, narrow definition and broad definition. So let me introduce the narrow definition of second language. So if we define a second language narrowly, then we are suggesting that that second language plays at least some social role in the learner's community. Does it make sense? So for example, English is a second language for Japanese who immigrated to the US, so to America. So let's say I was born in Japan and I grew up in Japan. Then let's say when I was 20 years old, maybe, or 30 years old, I went to the US and decided to live there. So I was immigrant. Well, this is not true. This is not true. But just I'm trying to give you an example. Then for me, English is a second language because in the US, because in the US people use English to communicate. So in communities in America, people use English to communicate with each other. So English plays a very, very important social role in American communities, of course. And English is used like that in the US, and I live in the US. I'm not saying I actually lived in the US. So in this case, we say English is a second language, narrowly defined second language. And according to this definition, a foreign language, when we say a foreign language, it implies that it plays no social role in the community, and that language is only learned in the classroom. So, for example, English is a foreign language for Japanese who live in Japan and learn it in Japan. So I think this is the case for most of you. This was the case for me as well. So I was in Japan, and I am in Japan now. And when I was a lot younger, I was in Japan and I learned English in Japan. And so in that sense, English was a foreign language to me. But, I think this is clear to most of you, but we have a broad definition as well. And if we broadly define second language, it can include both a second language and a foreign language defined narrowly. So this is very confusing. So first we talked about these cases. So if we narrowly define a second language, it's different from a foreign language. So this language is used for communication in the community, but this language is not used. So if you learn English in Japan, then it's a foreign language to you. But if you learn English in America, it's a second language to you. And so this is a narrow definition of second language. And this difference is very, very important, because people often they are often confused between these two things. But we also have a broad definition. So a broadly defined second language actually includes foreign languages as well. So so because we have narrow and broad definitions, it's a little difficult to understand the differences between foreign and second languages, but these are very important. So please try to understand and remember these definitions, okay? And there is another difference. This is between the word student and the word learner. So students are people who study at school. And in this case, they are seen as part of the social system of school. So we say high school students. And these students belong to a high school. They go to high school. And, of course, a high school is a kind of social system. And actually, learners are a kind of more broad, more general. When we say learners, we mean people who are involved in the internal process of learning. Where this learning takes place is not of concern. So when we say learners of English or L2 learners, we don't really mean, we are not exclusively meaning students at school. So because we can actually find learners of English outside school, of course. So let's say Brazilians come to Japan and they get a job in a Japanese company, and they are learners of Japanese, but they are not students. Okay, so these two terms are very similar, but they are different. And in second language acquisition research, we more often use learners. And let me talk a little bit about some important factors in second language acquisition. Today I will not talk a lot about learner external factors, but let me give you just one example, which is input. Well, without input, L2 acquisition, or actually L1 acquisition, too. So without input, the acquisition of language, any language, I think, will not take place. So input is very, very important. We need input to learn any language, whether it is our first language or our second language. So we need input to learn language. And input comes from, maybe in our case, a lot of input comes from textbooks of English, like this one. And we have other teaching materials, and input also comes from our teachers, our friends. And if we watch TV in English, we can get input from TV. And if we listen to CDs, we can get a lot of input from CDs, and we can find a lot of English on the internet. So we receive input from many places and many people, and everything that a learner hears and sees can be input. So input is very important, and without input, L2 acquisition will not take place, and L1 acquisition will not take place either. So input is very important. And let's learn a little bit about input, the word input. Input can be both a noun and a verb. And when it's a noun, it can be both countable and uncountable. So it's very complicated. So we can say just input, we can also say uninput, and we can say inputs. If it's a verb, it conjugates, it changes as in input, input, input. So in a sense, it doesn't change. But we can also say input, inputted, inputted. Well, this is also possible. So we can say I have already input data, I have already inputted data. It seems that we can say both. Well, I'm not a native speaker of English, so I don't know if this is correct, but my dictionary says this, so I believe this is correct. Okay, here I have some excuse me, mistaken views about the linguistic input. So learners learn all the input. This is wrong. This view is mistaken. This is wrong. Inputs are learned in the order they are presented. This is wrong too. So we tend to believe if we teach a grammar to so let's say we are teachers of English and we teach grammars to our students, and we tend to believe that if we teach grammar 1, the students' brains learn that grammar. So this is what we teach, and this is what their brains receive, and their brains learn this. We want to believe this always happens. So, and if we teach another grammar, their brains learn that grammar as well. But sometimes this just doesn't happen. So I would not say this is the fact, but I think this is closer to the fact, closer than these views. So some of the inputs are learned fully, some are learned only partially, and the others are not learned at all. So this is, I think, closer to the fact. And learning does not always proceed in the same order in which inputs are presented. So for example, we want to teach grammar 1, but our students' brains somehow misunderstood or misinterpreted that thing in some way, and then what they have learned is different from what we actually wanted to teach. So we wanted to teach this one, but what they learned is this one. So, and sometimes even if we try to teach a grammar, our students' brains do not learn it at all. I'll give you some examples, or maybe just one example, which is about articles in English. So we have indefinite articles and definite article, and sometimes we have no article before a noun. And Japanese EFL learners like me are often taught about articles in English at school. I still remember that I was taught the system of articles when I was a first year student in junior high school. However, many Japanese EFL learners do not learn them, so do not become able to use them. So even if they are taught, or they may come to use that too much, even in cases where it shouldn't be used. So this is a typical mistake that many Japanese EFL learners make. So so we want to teach the and an, but you know, some learners just don't learn them, and you know, we try to explain where we should use the and where we should not use the and where we should use and an, but you know, some of the learners learn these rules in a way that we don't really expect them to do. So so what we try to teach is different from what they have actually learned. For example, using that too much. So so of course, input is very, very important. Without input, L2 acquisition does not take place, of course. So input is very important, but to understand L2 acquisition, we must understand not only the role of input, but also factors that are internal to the learner. So maybe at this moment you don't really understand what these factors are, so I'll explain them later. So input is learned through the interaction with the learner internal factors. So we have to understand what these factors are. So these are examples of learner internal factors. So mother tongue, so in our case Japanese, and do you know this? Universal grammar. And I'll explain this later. And the age of the learner, and motivation, and language learning aptitudes, and learning strategies and personality, and there are many, many other factors as well. So this is maybe the easiest to understand, mother tongue or our first language. So my mother tongue is Japanese, and you know, speakers of Japanese and speakers of German may learn English as a second language differently, or may not. We don't know. But this is one possibility. And mother tongue is something that we already have when we learn a second language. So it's already in our brain, somewhere in our brain. So that's internal to us. We have it inside us. So that's one learner internal factor, which may affect our second language acquisition. And universal grammar, this may also exist in our brains. Universal grammar is universal properties of human language, and universal grammar is found theoretically it is found in all natural languages in the world. So it is said that there are 3,000 to 6,000 natural languages in the world now, and according to many linguists, there are properties, linguistic properties that are common to all those natural languages in the world. And where do they come from? They come from our brains. So somewhere in our brains, we have universal grammar. In what form? I don't know. But I think you'll come to know this if you study in university, if you study linguistics or English linguistics or syntax, you will understand what this is. And this is also one very important internal factor. And also the learner's age. So we can learn a second language at many different ages. We can start when we are a baby, or when we are a preschooler or elementary school student, pupil, adolescent, and maybe in our 20s, in our I don't know, 50s or 60s, or even in our 80s. And if learners' ages are different, for example, children and adults, or maybe children of different ages, so these people may learn an L2 differently, or may not. We don't know. So the learner's age may affect the process of second language acquisition. May. And also, children may be more sensitive to some kinds of input than adults, or vice versa. It's also a possibility that adults are more sensitive, and adults are better. That's also one possibility. I'm not saying that children are always better. But our age is also internal to us, so it's one of the important learner internal factors in second language acquisition. And motivation. So this is what we have in our heart. So this is also internal to us, and maybe more highly motivated learners may learn a second language more quickly. Or maybe only very highly motivated L2 learners may continue learning an L2 for a long time. So if you are not motivated enough, you may stop your second language acquisition at some point without reaching a very high level of proficiency. And this is a little difficult. Here we have the word aptitude, which is tekisei in Japanese. So this is just like a talent, learners with higher aptitudes, higher language learning aptitudes, may learn an L2 more easily and more quickly. So some people are more talented in L2 learning. So this is also possible, and we sometimes feel this. Maybe your friends learn English faster than you, maybe. And there's been research about this. And these are typical language learning aptitudes. So these are abilities for phonetic coding, abilities for recognition of grammatical functions, and abilities for associative memory, and abilities for inductive learning. And maybe there are more kinds of language learning aptitudes. And this is also studied in the field of second language acquisition. Okay. And of course, there are many other internal factors, but we can't. I can't introduce all of them in this video. So this is just a summary of what I explained today. So we learned these concepts: second language acquisition, English as a second language, English as a foreign language, and the difference between second and foreign languages in narrow and broad definitions, and learner external factors. There are many learner external factors, but in this video I introduced only one, which is input, and input is very, very important. If you don't have input, if you don't have linguistic input, you cannot learn a language. But there are other factors that are internal to the learner, which are also very, very important. So for example, mother tongue, universal grammar, age, motivation, aptitudes, and what else? Personality and learning strategies, and many other factors. Okay, so these are very, very basic concepts, basic words in terms, and so please remember these terms. Okay, thanks for listening.